Saturday, December 30th, 2023. Man, this year went by fast. My Lord. As you guys read in the title, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Let me take you back to in the Wayback Machine real quick and tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll lead up to what I want to talk about today. So my investing life, I guess, started when I was a kid, right? I was born in 1975 in Rochester, New York. And I was the type of kid that was always curious and wanted different things, and I knew I had to get that through money. And my grandparents raised me. They were from the South, and they were the type of people that didn't hand you anything. You had to work for everything you got. And I'm glad they were like that, man. Couldn't ask for anything. So I was the type of kid where I would sit at the end of my street, because I lived off of I lived kind of like in a circle, like a cul-de-sac type of street. I grew up in the suburbs. I didn't grow up hard. Grew up, I would say, just a little bit above, not a little bit above, a couple notches above poverty, but suburban, like middle class, right around there, maybe a little tiny bit under middle class. But then as my grandparents got older, they started doing better, and I did move up to middle class. And I was the type of kid who would sit at the end of the road, and I would watch the cars go by, and I remember thinking, if I can get a quarter from every one of these cars, or a dime or something like that. So I had to figure some things out. So I would cut grass and just do the normal stuff kids would do, and then I would save up my money, and I was always good at that. I was always good at saving. And then I started doing some things as a kid where I'd sell like candy and bubble gum, and I'd get those big bags of, the little small Halloween candies or whatever, take them to school, sell them. I learned quickly about investing, how to put money into something and then getting a return on it, right? And again, I would work a lot of different odd jobs to get the money to invest in. And then once I started investing and having my money work for me, I realized quickly that I wasn't like a 9-to-5 guy. But I thought you had to do that. So I had a few jobs as a teenager. Nothing serious, but started like I had a Wendy's job, worked at a factory, plastic factory. Then I joined the Navy in 1994. And that was real cool. That was a good experience. I'll tell you more about that later. Did my time there. Honorable discharge, nothing bad or nothing like that. I thought I hated it at the time, but I did love it, looking back on it. And then, I got some jobs out of the military in my field and stuff, and I quickly realized that I didn't want to work a job. So I started reading the investing books. Now, again, I was born in 1975, which is 4 years after, actually 3.5 for me, after August 15th, 1971. And we all know what happened that day when Richard Nixon officially took us off the gold standard. It started becoming clear that you needed to be a part-time asset manager, a portfolio manager, an investor, just to keep up with inflation. I didn't know it at the time, though. I didn't learn that till later. So I quickly realized I didn't want any jobs. It's crazy because my channel is called Jerry Loves Freedom, after many times changing the name of it. But I realized that I do love freedom. There's nothing more satisfying than to waking up when you want to. And I remember having those jobs and having to get up in the morning and having to drive there in traffic, and then getting there, and then couldn't wait for my lunch break or a little break in between, and then getting off work, and then, TGIF and everything else. And I've had some jobs that I really liked too, but I just didn't like having to be there. Now, again, I'm just telling you my story, and there's nothing wrong with having a job. Nothing wrong with that at all. Everybody should have a job. But I knew that I wanted to be not because I wanted to be rich, that I wanted to be financially free. Is that I just wanted my freedom. I wanted my time. And my definition of financial freedom is when you have enough money coming in every week, every 2 weeks, every month, or whatever, that it covers your bills without you having to work and having to trade your time for money. So I worked very hard on that, and I worked on different investments. And when I would get paid, I would save money, because again, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. I wasn't making a bunch of money, but I knew how to keep it. And then I had a friend of mine when I was in my 20s. He would teach me about stocks and bonds, because I never learned about that stuff in my teenage years or my early 20s. It wasn't until my early to mid 20s, maybe 23, 24. My friend, he's like a brother to me. He taught me a lot of stuff too. He taught me about 401ks and Roth IRAs and stocks and bonds, and I started getting really into that stuff. So I would save in that stuff too, outside of my investments, as far as like outside of my actual savings account, when actually putting part of the money that I earned away into other income producing assets that I would buy later on down the line. And I learned about all that stuff, man. I learned about, diversifying your portfolio and having this and that, and I just was obsessed with it. And then I ran across a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I didn't know anything about gold and silver at the time, but he talked about gold and silver in that book. Robert Kiyosaki did, and I kind of blew it off a little bit, because I just felt like it wasn't doing anything, because at the time I was learning about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they would talk about how gold is just a pet rock and it doesn't do anything, and I was more worried about getting a yield and stuff like that. So eventually, I learned a lot from Rich Dad Poor Dad, though. I took a lot of that information and applied it, because again, guys, people think knowledge is power. It's not. You can know everything in the world, but if you don't apply it, the knowledge means nothing, honestly. So I try to take everything I learned, because I'm kind of like a naturally lazy person. Like, I don't like to do physical things. I wish I was different, but when I do have to do physical things, I really have to muster up the energy to do it. And I'm getting better as I'm older now, because I have to do some things now. But I never liked, my brother was the type of guy that worked with his hand. He was a plumber and stuff like that. I remember my grandparents used to tell me, he said, boy, Jerry, he would starve if he had to work like a physical job, and working construction or being or whatever. And she was right. I was the type of person that used my mind and stuff, and I had a lot of sales jobs and stuff like that. But anyways, so I kept building my my portfolio of things that not only were savings for down the road, but also getting me out of the rat race, as Robert Kiyosaki so eloquently called it. And I did that. I would play his game, Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad's cash flow game. I loved that, where you're just buying income producing assets. And I did that, and I made it to where I was financially free. Now let me say this, let me stop right here. I'm not a rich guy or nothing like that. I believe I am in the top 1% though in the world. And this is outside of Bitcoin. I'm in the top 1% in the world, not in America, nowhere near that, but in America, because again, we live in the richest country in the world. And if you're top 10 or 15% here, then you're probably top 1 or 5%. Maybe not 1%, maybe 5% in the world, something like that. But I could be off by 1 or 2%. And so when I finally made that goal, I felt really good. But then I got lazy, because I didn't have to work anymore. And again, I wasn't rich. I did have some savings, but now I had my time. I had my free time. And so I went back to school in my late 30s. Went back to school. And again, when I would get lazy, what I mean by that is I didn't have the hunger that I did trying to get to the thing I did. I got me to the financial freedom. I got into wholesaling houses, because before I was kind of flipping some houses. I would always buy stuff and flip it. But I started getting into a little bit of flipping houses, not the traditional kind, but just doing a couple rehabs here and there, not with my money or anything like that. It was just like a kind of a little weird way I did it, you know, but I'll get into that in another video. But I started wholesaling houses, which means you find an empty house, and then, because I wanted to do flipping houses in the beginning, but then I did it in a way that I didn't have to fully flip. I would work with other people and get a piece of the deal. That's what I mean. But then I started looking for empty houses, and let's just say a house was 100 grand, all fixed up. I would find the house, it'd be empty. I'd have to find the owner, see if they're willing to sell. I would do a one-page contract with them. For those of you who don't know what wholesaling is in houses, it's just basically buying it low and selling a little higher. And then I developed a list of investors that would buy my houses, and I didn't put a penny into it. So I'd find a house that I knew that was worth $100,000, all fixed up. It was all messed up. I'd make a contract on it for $40,000, one-page contract, give them the $10 to sign off on it to make sure it was good. And as I signed off on the house, if I was the buyer, I would put my name, and then I will put and/or signs. In other words, or partner's approval. In other words, if my partner wants the house, or if I assign it to somebody else, I can do that within the boundaries of that contract. And I kind of mastered that, and I became pretty good at that. So I would sell the contract right over to an investor. They would even call me up. And I got to the point where I had so many investors that I was working with that they knew me by name. They would call me, see what I had. And I would even go out and pay people. You see the house, you know, the signs, we buy houses and stuff like that. And I would pay people, call them bird dogs, to find me houses, and I would give them $100, $200, whatever. And then I did that. I'd make three grand on a house, or 5 grand, or whatever I would make. You know, it wasn't a bunch. But then I would get lazy a little bit, because I'd have like $20,000, thinking that was a lot of money, which it is in the big picture in US dollars at that time, back in the what was that, early 2000s. And so then I started keeping a few of the houses, and then I started renting rooms out, which I do now. I don't own any real estate. I did, but I sold it. But I just control real estate. That's the best way to do it. I don't have any real estate in my name. I like to get a tenant, or get a owner that is distressed or something like that, and make it a win for the owner of the house, get them out of the property, and they may even live there, and I'll help them I got one guy that lives in the basement of his and my house, I guess. Gave him some cash, paid up all his bills, because his mom died. He was in a bad situation, so I helped him out. He's got a 4-bedroom, so I said, hey, you stay in the basement. Got the basement done for him. He stays down there, and then I rent the rooms out by the week, and I make a pretty good profit off of that, and I got a few that I do that with. So I don't own anything, any real estate or anything. I just like to control it. So fast forward, when I was learning, like I was talking about at school, at finance school, or school when my major was finance, I started learning all these things about, and it was the fiat currency, and I didn't have no idea what fiat currency was. They started talking about gold and silver again. I was thinking in my mind, I was like, oh, this is BS. Warren Buffett said it's nothing, and blah, blah, blah. I was coming in for an investor standpoint, because at that point now, I kind of wanted to be rich now, even though I had some stuff and I was doing okay, I wanted to make it on a higher level, right? Because again, 1971 proved that more and more people just started thinking about money and how much you could make, and I got wrapped all into that too. And so I always knew that, again, if you want to be a chef, you go to culinary school. If you want to be a doctor, you go to school to be a doctor. If you want to be a lawyer, you go to law school. If you want to be rich, you study money, study finance, and that's what I did. But unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me, I realized, because I wanted to be like I've said in many videos, I wanted to be a financial advisor, a personal financial advisor. But I wasn't but it's okay. It's okay. You're fine. Don't worry about it. Lady was coming around the corner. She almost hit me. She wasn't paying attention. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. Anyways, I realized that even though I didn't know what I was doing at the time, I just knew that it wasn't right, you know, to tell them to buy things that I had already sold. Because at the time, about 2017, 18, 19, around that time, I started selling all my stocks and stuff, man, because I just felt like it wasn't mine, you know. And it was funny, it just all this stuff happening leading up to 2020 and the scamdemic, where my same friend who put me on with all the stocks and bonds and stuff like that, he still had his portfolio, started telling me about gold and silver. And I was learning about things about fiat currency and stuff like that. And then right when my mind was open, because again, I've heard about gold and silver bullion before, he had purchased, because he lives in Arkansas, he had purchased some, I think he purchased some, did he purchase a gold coin? I think a 1 ounce eagle or something, or whatever, and some silver. He says, hey man, do you know where this town is? And he was tricking me into going there and picking it up for him. And when I did, and I felt that weight of that gold and silver, I was like, wow, right? And I had a few bucks on me, and I ended up buying like a 100 ounce eagle hard barred. And this is July of 2020. And I said, man, I just was hooked right then. As soon as I touched it, I was hooked. And so I said, hey, how long are you guys going to be open? And he says, oh, we'll be open too. And I remember the day, because silver went up to $24, and they were like tripping off. I was like, that's high? They're like, yeah, that's really high. And I started looking at the chart, and I was like, holy shit. FOMO started kicking in. And so I had some cash, so I bought, let's just say I bought a lot that day. And then as you can see, if you look back in my videos, I started my channel in September 2020. So about a month and a half after I was stacking, because I was just, that first month and a half before I made my videos, before I started my channel, I was just digesting all the gold and silver stuff. Because again, I was 45, and I was like, how me as a guy who study money and study finance don't know about gold and silver, and that the fiat currency. And I started watching all the Mike Maloney stuff and learned all of that stuff. And I just could not believe how stupid I was. I felt like a dummy, you know. And then I went back to my old mantra is, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So a lot of my savings I put into precious metals. I still had some cash and stuff, but I put it into precious metals. And I thought, this is the way, man, this is the way. So I'm telling you guys this for a reason, because all the things that I've invested in, probably not even tell you everything. I've invested in a lot of different things. Whatever your portfolio is, I completely understand where you're coming from. Now, I'm not saying I've invested in every single thing, but the reason why we invest is because, again, in 1971, they took us off the gold standard, and we just can't put cash in the bank anymore. Like our, great grandfathers or grandfathers could just save it, put it in the bank, and buy a house for $10,000. You know, when my quote unquote real estate goes up, or anything that I have goes up in value, it's not because the product or service got any better and it's getting better because of the price going up is the indicator is going up. It's only going up because it's more currency that's being printed, and it's going up. The dollars are chasing less goods, which means the value of those dollars are not as high, right? And the purchasing power is losing or leaving, and that's why everything costs so much. Like I said, my grandparents' house that I grew up in, bought it for $103,000, sold it for $300-something thousand. 30 years later, same house but older. So I'm saying all this so to let you know that I can relate to each and every one of you, right? Meanwhile, the first few months when I was in precious metals, I would hear little things about Bitcoin, just little things here and there, because again, I just didn't watch precious metal videos. I would watch stuff about the economy and inflation and printing and the debasement of currency. And then every once in a while, I would run across some cryptocurrency videos and some Bitcoin videos, which I thought were the same. Long story short, I know you guys heard this story a bunch of times, but I got to be like Michael Jordan, where Jordan says he plays the same and does the same things every single time he plays, because he never knows there's always somebody in the stands that's never seen him play. So for you guys that's been here for a long time, what I'm getting ready to say, you've already heard me say, but again, I could have a new person here that's never heard me say it. So forgive me for this. But once I saw the cryptocurrency videos and the Bitcoin videos, again, I was fighting against it because I was living in my echo chamber, just like I was when I had my stocks and bonds or whatever portfolio I had. You know, I would live in that echo chamber, and if I heard anything about gold or silver or anything that went against that, I just didn't want to listen. I just didn't. And naturally, because you're so focused on what you're doing, you just think this is the way. This vehicle I'm using is the way. You know, these stocks and bonds and this real estate or whatever your vehicle is, this is just the best way to do it. It just is. And nobody could tell you nothing because you've done the work on it. You've done hours and hours and thousands of hours of studying. Now, I wasn't to that point yet with gold and silver because, again, I was just a newbie. But for somebody that came in at my stage and only been in a few months, I don't know if there's a lot of people that studied gold and silver as much as I did and put a percentage of their wealth of it as much as I did. I just did a lot. I went both feet in. Now, I didn't sell a house or anything for it, but I definitely, you know, put a lot in there, right? And so when I finally just started looking at these little videos about cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, you know, started learning things, and people that I listened to, like I remember Rob Sultan, good guy. He doesn't make any videos anymore, but Rob Sultan is a precious metal dealer where, you know, you won't find a lot of people with more silver than that guy. You know, he made videos about Bitcoin, and I remember I would always skip those videos. He wasn't talking about cryptocurrency, he was talking about Bitcoin, and I would just skip them, right? But then I heard Robert Kiyosaki talking about Bitcoin. I'm like, why the hell would Robert Kiyosaki talk about Bitcoin? And then I heard, you know, a lot of gold bugs that I really, really liked would be on one gold and silver channel or video, and then that same person underneath the video I just watched be recommended being talking about Bitcoin. And I'm thinking, okay, he must be bashing Bitcoin. Then I look, and then he's talking about Bitcoin like he's talking about gold. And I'm like, come on, man, this is ridiculous. And the more and more I try to avoid it, the more and more it popped up. So I would click on some, and the guys I really, really respected. All right, let me hear them out, man. Let me see what they got to say. I'm not selling my freaking gold and silver. No way. But let me hear what they got to say. And I will listen to them. And at the time, I didn't have any. This is, when I started really listening, it was probably about December 2020. And then I listened to December 2020, and then January 2020. And then Bitcoin in February started running up to $30,000. And I'm just like, wow. Now, again, I didn't know, my fundamentals weren't that strong with Bitcoin, but I did have some basics on it. Nowhere near what I knew after about a year of studying, because it takes a lot of studying for Bitcoin. But I did know some things. I did know some things. And I knew there was only 21 million. And I knew cryptocurrency or crypto and the blockchain was going to be something in the future. So I said, Jerry, you got to allocate something to this shit, man. That's what I was thinking. I said, all right. So on February 24th, 2021, I bought some crypto. I bought Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, I think Solana or something like that. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but 2 months later, once I understood the difference between crypto and Bitcoin, I sold my positions in my cryptos on Coinbase, and I put them all into Bitcoin. And the rest was history. Now, I say all that to say this, right? If you have a portfolio of all the things I just talked about, whether it's real estate, gold, silver, stocks, bonds, anything that you put outside of your physical cash savings, or excuse me, outside of your net worth that you're not saving, meaning your house, that's not a savings account. Your cars, the things that you have in your home that you need, that you don't need to liquidate in an emergency, because you don't want to do that. You want to take your investments and your cash and stuff like that to use that for. You don't want to use the stuff that you have in your house. That's why you have investments, so it can grow and help you in the future. It's like planting a seed. If you have any of these things, which I'm sure you do, and you have no Bitcoin at all, I'm going to say this to you. Study Bitcoin, my friends, okay? Study it, learn about it. And here's why. Not because Jerry from Jerry Loves Freedom tells you to. Again, I am just an idiot. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm just a guy holding my phone. But learn about it, because it's been here for 15 years and I have not killed it yet. And now, there's some dogs over there. And now, you have Larry Fink, who is probably, whoever you ask, if you ask 10 people, maybe 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 will tell you this. The most powerful man on this planet, who talked bad about crypto all the time, and now is getting ready to be the lead Bitcoin ETF, him and his company, BlackRock, in the world. What does he see that you don't see? Now, I'm not saying he's smarter than you or nothing like that, but, you know, we're talking about Larry Fink here. And I know he's not a good guy and stuff like that, but then you got Jamie Dimon, who the other day, a couple weeks ago, I think, was in Congress talking bad about quote-unquote crypto. He's talking about Bitcoin, really. I think he did say Bitcoin. You know, Jamie Dimon is one of the richest men in the world. CEO of JP Morgan, I believe. CFO or CEO or something like that. He says Bitcoin is just used for, you know, criminal things, and, you know, they use it to avoid taxes and, you know, go past the US dollar. And, you know, if I was the government, I would ban it. Next thing you know, on the S1 filings of BlackRock's ETF, guess who they got on there to help them with the transactions? You guessed it, Jamie Dimon and JP Morgan. Don't ever trust these bankers, by the way. Who cares what they say? Watch what they do. So my point is, whether you believe the ETFs that are coming out are gonna, you know, monopolize Bitcoin, or you don't trust billionaires or whatever, one thing you always have to trust, ladies and gentlemen, whether you mistrust them or distrust them, you have to trust their incentives, and that they're always going to do what's best self-interested for them. You got to trust they're always going to fulfill their self-interest. Let's just say that. And ask yourself this. If you're watching my channel, which you are, obviously, why does Jerry always talk about Bitcoin? Why did Jerry sell his precious metals for Bitcoin? Because that's what I did. I slowly started selling my silver. I consolidated my gold into my silver holdings, platinum holdings, and Bitcoin, some of my Bitcoin, because I felt like gold was great, but I felt those three in combination were better because of things I've said in the videos before. You know, I just felt like silver was undervalued in comparison to Bitcoin, and how much was coming out of the ground at a 16-to-1 ratio, and it being 85-to-1 ratio in price, and then platinum obviously being much more rare and only being half the price of gold. I felt like, you know, platinum should have been much higher than that, and I felt it was all undervalued. And then, of course, Bitcoin only had 21 million. But then as the more and more I learned about Bitcoin, the more and more I slowly started selling my generic silver. Oh, I don't need this. And then getting rid of all the common silver, the stuff that's made every day, and then floating towards more scarce stuff. Because we all float towards scarcity, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we do as human beings. You know, remember, guys, we did not pick the US dollar. The US dollar and the government picked us. Gold was the real money. And the reason why we picked gold, because it was the most scarcest, prettiest gold in the world, or metal in the world. There's 4 stages to money, guys. First, what gold was like a trinket. It was like a token or something you played with, you know, like a hobby or something. It's like, oh, this is nice, because you thought it was valuable and it was nice. And then once it gets past that stage, it comes to the store of value stage, right? Where we keep it like, oh, this is rare, this is good, I'm going to keep this as something that'll give me more of what I want later, right? It's a store of value. That's the second stage. The third stage is it becomes a medium of exchange. We say, man, this stuff is so valuable. We've been holding it for this long, and now we can purchase more things than we could with it, or trade more things than we could with it than we did when we first had it, or our ancestors first had it. And now we're going to trade it back and forth. That's why they make gold coins and silver coins for smaller things, because gold is much more dense and it carry more value than silver, because it's a lot more rare than silver. So we always float towards scarcity. That's stage 3. And then stage 4 of a money is it becomes the global world asset, or the world reserve currency, or whatever you want to call it, the world money, where everybody around the world recognizes that money. I believe Bitcoin will hit stage 4. Bitcoin right now is at stage 2, where it's a store of value. There's a very small part of it with Bitcoin that is a medium of exchange, because that's stage 3, medium of exchange. Well, you change if I didn't say that. Where you pass it as value for goods and services with other, because they recognize that value. That was a tough decision for me to sell my silver, ladies and gentlemen. One of the toughest things ever, because if you watch my videos, you know, I sold the stuff that I liked the least first, generics and stuff like that. And I love me some constitutional silver. If you're familiar with my channel, you already know what I'm talking about. I love me some quarters, dimes, 50-cent pieces, dollars, all that stuff, man. I love it. I love my Engelhard bars, my Johnson Mattheys, the stuff that they're not making anymore. Why? Because it's scarce. But as much as I love that stuff, I had to make a decision, man. I had to make a decision. I had to go back to my old mantra. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And what's the best way to keep it? Is it with constitutional silver? Yeah, it's better than generic. Is it with Engelhard bars and Johnson Mattheys? Yeah, that's good too. That might even be better than constitutional silver. But is that stuff better than this new digital money? And the more and more I learned about this digital money, the more and more I had to wake up to the world's reality, not my reality. Because my reality is I love silver. Guys, the reason why the world has currencies, because it's just easier to use as a medium of exchange. It's less encumbersome. You know, holding gold coins and stuff like that is just not efficient. So we use fiat currency to do that. And then, of course, human beings printed more those fiat currencies, or those promissory notes or debt notes or whatever you want to call them, than there was the actual metals and gold and silver. And that's where the debasement comes in. But when you have that, the crookedness and all this other stuff, you're just like, wow, man, how are we ever going to have a good money? You know, all this crooked stuff. And then when I learned more about Bitcoin, again, we chose gold because it was rare. Bitcoin chose to be the most rarest money in the world, and it was built and made to be money. To not only be a trinket in the beginning of 2009, 10, 11, this little hobby thing that nerds and cryptographers and cryptographers, libertarians and stuff like that used to play around with, because they weren't thinking about being rich. You know, they just thought about, let's pass some digital internet money back and forth so we can get rid of the government and not have to worry about that. It became that of, holy crap, Bitcoin's $100 a coin now. Wait a minute, we might be cooking here. And then more people outside of that circle started saying, wait a minute, this may be something. And they started looking at it as maybe a future currency or a store of value, and that's what they did. And I went back, I'm a historian, ladies and gentlemen. I had to go back and look at all that stuff, not just from 2021, February when I bought, but all the way back to January 3rd, 2009. And I learned a lot about them cyberpunks and everything that happened before that. And then my last straw, like I said, is when last summer that just passed, 2023, when Larry Fink and BlackRock said we're announcing a Bitcoin ETF. I had to look at it and go, wow, this is about to be something. And again, like I said, I do this for my lineage, my kids and my grandkids and stuff like that. And I had to ask myself, although I love precious metals, me personally, I love my silver better than Bitcoin, because I can, if you don't hold it, you don't hold it. I'm an old school guy, you know, analog stuff, holding my Polaroid pictures and all that other stuff. I had to look to the future. And I'm not no fortune teller or nothing. I don't know what's going to happen. But I had to use some common sense and think, well, we haven't used gold and silver for money for many, many years, because we're using fiat currency. Do I see us bartering and trading for gold and silver in the future? And unfortunately, the answer for me was no. And again, it's not about me. So from summer 2023 all the way up until I sold my silver, not that long ago, the last of it. I'm talking about the stuff I love. The stuff I love, boy. I struggled, man. If you watch my old videos, I struggled, man. Bad with that stuff about doing it. And you can hear me just transferring, because again, I've already had people on my channel that I've convinced to go and use Bitcoin, transfer over to Bitcoin and sell all their precious metals. And that was a tough decision, but I did it. And once I've done it, I realized I did the right thing. And, you know, even though Bitcoin is volatile, it shot up to 40-something thousand. Thank God I still bought a lot in the 20s at the time, and some 30s too. I think 2024 is going to be crazy. I'm going to give you my prediction on that. But here's what I know. Like Silver Joker says, the future's on its way, you know. And again, man, all the work I put in of learning different things and stuff like that, all I know is, if I can give you any advice, is step outside of your echo chamber, okay? Watch something or go somewhere or learn about something you haven't learned about. If you think Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme or a scam or whatever the FUD that you think it is, find out why it's not, or look it up, or do your research or whatever, you know, because you know what Peter Schiff says about it. You know all the gold and silver people say about it. Step outside the echo chamber, find out yourself. That's what I did. And it was the best decision I ever made. And again, guys, going back to the title of this video, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. And the best way to keep it, and to me, the only way to keep it, is through Bitcoin. I love each and every one of you, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace and love, guys.